It is, I'm not entirely sure what time it is. I think it's around 6:15 in the morning, and this is around the time that I normally get up to start writing. However, today is a little bit different than other days in that I'm going out to a coffee shop later on today in order to write. If you don't know, I am currently, with this project being as big as it is, I have realized that I actually need to give myself some sort of reward for each milestone that I, cross. And one of those is my stretch goals for each week. In order to get this whole manuscript done by the summer, I calculated that I needed to write about 7,500 words a week, which is 2,500 words more than my average. And so each time I hit that goal, I am gifting myself a coffee date. And this just means going out to a local coffee shop and getting a fancy tea or coffee. This is not something that I do normally, and it really is very gives me all the warm and fuzzy feelings, and it feels very idealistic, as my husband likes to say. He makes fun of me for that because I really do love seeing the idealism in life. Anyway, today I'm going out to a coffee shop because I'm going to meet a friend, and I figured why not just spend one of my Nook miles and, go and grab a really nice coffee and work at a coffee shop. I've always loved writers who are able to go to coffee shops and just sit and write and, think and be around people. And I've only done it one other time, years ago, which is wild to me. So since I am going to the coffee shop to specifically write, I am not going to push myself very hard this morning as far as writing goes. Not that I ever do. I really don't believe in pushing yourself until you struggling against your work, but I'm just not going to be as concerned if I don't get a lot of words on the page because I'm specifically going to do that later. Before I get started this morning, I just thought that I would, talk to you guys about how I even start a new project, because I think that starting is probably the hardest part, at least for me. Staring at the blank page is just so intimidating, and I get really inside my head about those first few words. With my last novel, A Daisy in Lily's Valley, the whole beginning of that novel I struggled with. I was getting so in my head because once I actually started getting words on the page and just kind of left behind the notion that they needed to be perfect, that's when I really got into the flow of the story and the words started coming a lot more naturally. And there's actually a point in the story in which I clearly remember it shifting from me dreading every morning to wake up and come to the page because I was just struggling to figure out what was going to happen next, to being so much easier and so much more fun. And it was actually the farmer's market scene. And as soon as I wrote that scene, as soon as I wrote it, I was like, you know what? This is a lot of fun. Let's just get the ball rolling. And the same thing has happened in this novel that I'm writing right now, my current work in progress, which, if you didn't know, I'm currently referring to it as Project Magic. It's happened now, although I don't remember exactly when it happened. This one crept up on me. It wasn't as in my face as A Daisy in Lily's Valley. I just wanted to talk a little bit about how I start a new project. So I like to tell people that at the start of every project, I'm just like a little squirrel gathering nuts of information. I'm just picking out things that are interesting to me and I'm writing them down in my notes app, or I'm writing them down in a notebook. I'm putting them all together. So I have these little folders that if I have loose items, I'll stick them in there. And then that's just what I start with. And each has started with something very specific, a very specific idea. So with my first, that specific idea was a character. I literally have this written in my notes app somewhere that says nothing more than a young woman with red hair who's painfully shy and loves to bake. That was it. That was the only idea that came to me. I just kind of went with it. Who is this woman? What is her life currently looking like? What is it that she's looking to gain from her life? What is it that she's struggling with? And through all of that, a story started to form. Also, with that particular book, it came at a very specific time in my life, and it was a time in which things were really challenging. I was going through a lot of medical issues, and I was in and out of doctors. Things were very stressful, and I really wanted to write the book that I needed. I needed something that felt like a warm hug. And so this book was really written entirely for me, first and foremost. I think that it is one that resonates with a lot of people, but at its core, it was a book that I needed at that time. Because my life was so challenging at the time, when I started writing it, I did not want my main character, Emiliana, to have any conflict. I just wanted her to sail through life breezily, happily, and I quickly realized that you cannot have a book without conflict. Like that's the whole premise of a book, is entering into a character's life and figuring out what the conflict is. I quickly changed that. There's definitely conflict sprinkled in. For the second novel, Project Magic, my initial idea was literally based around an event. So I didn't have any characters in my mind. It was all based around this one singular event, and I haven't even gotten to yet in writing, even though I'm at 105,000 words. So that's a problem for future Brittany. Anyway, that single event spun my imagination into asking questions like, who are the people surrounding this event? Where is this event taking place? Like, what happens in the lead up to this specific event? And what's the fallout afterwards? So I kind of had this imagery of directly before and after this specific event, and that was it. I had to figure out everything else, which is so much harder, I'm finding, because I really didn't understand who the main character was going to be. I didn't know what she was doing in this area, what it is that her life looked like, what it is that she wanted. I didn't even know what she looked like or where she was from, you know? It took a lot of nut gathering. Like a little squirrel, I just kept gathering and gathering until all the biggest points of my story came together. The initial idea came to me while I was still writing my first novel, and that was published in 2023. That means it's taken me over 3 years to really gather the momentum and the steam for my current novel. And I didn't realize until I had gotten all of the main points of my story, opening image, the main event, which I already knew, and then the conclusion, like where all of my characters are at the very end. It wasn't until I had those 3 points that I could even start writing. And I didn't realize why. I was so frustrated with myself for not being able to write. But I, as a writer, am not a pantser. I'll get more into that in a minute. I really need to see the main overarching story come together first before I can start writing, because otherwise I completely go off track. I'm learning that as a writer, I need to see at least a few paces in front of me. I don't need to see the whole road, but I need to see at least in the far off distance, you know, a building. And how am I going to get to that building? I think that there's a quote out there of like driving with your headlights and you can only see the first few feet in front of me. I can't do that. I have to have a clear day and I need to be able to see at least a far off distant point. Otherwise, I wind up writing 30,000 words where Emiliana is not working in a bakery. She's working in a bank, and it just doesn't work. So I am firmly directly right in between a pantser and a plotter. I need just enough plotting to move the story forward, but enough mystery so that my characters and things can just surprise me while I'm writing, because that's the whole fun of writing, is discovering the story. With this current novel, it from the beginning has proven challenging. And so because it's been so difficult, I decided to switch things up. It had been a while since I had started A Daisy in Lily's Valley, and I couldn't really remember my process that well. So what I decided to do was just try a bunch of different things. So one of them was, I thought I could write this entire manuscript on a typewriter, which was absolutely wild. I did start, and I don't remember how much I got into it, but I just thought it would be a really fun way to do it. It was very whimsical. I thought that this story was going to be a little bit more whimsical. It turned out to be a lot darker. Later on, I realized my process for writing really involves kind of like, I'll start a chapter and I'll have the information, and then I'll type everything that I have out in my head, and then I'll get to a point where I don't know what exactly comes next, but I know what comes next in a few steps. And so I'll stop, put a big space between them, write that next chunk, and then figure out a way to connect the two, which famously you cannot do on a typewriter. So the typewriter was out. I also attempted to write the story chronologically because there's a lot of flashback scenes, and I thought it might be interesting to really develop alongside this main character and see what happened in her life to make her the way that she is today. That turned out not to work either. In fact, it kind of gave me the same thing that happened with the Daisy and Lily's Valley with my pantsing attempts. I went way off course and I started telling a story that I actually didn't want to tell. It wasn't a waste of my time because a lot of the ideas that I wrote are going to make it into the final draft, or at least this final manuscript. But yeah, I was just going way too far down the path. So I circled back and decided to print out every single random idea and note that I had, which I then remembered is what I did with a Daisy and Lily's Valley. I printed out all that cluster of stuff that is usually in my brain. I cut each individual piece out and I put it up on my corkboard in roughly the order in which I thought things were going to happen. Granted, a lot of things changed, a lot of things moved around, but it gave me a roadmap to start following. And that's when I really started, and this only happened at the beginning of this year. So there have been years of me like false starts and stops and lots of words written. However, that is all the feed for this story, the creative food for this story. So it will show up in its own way, even if it's between the lines. It's funny when you write a story and publish it, it's kind of like your brain starts to blur the lines. It starts to give you rose-colored glasses and you look back and you forget about all of the pain and the crying and all of the stuff that went into writing that first novel. You only remember what went well, and that's so wild. So like I kept thinking back to A Daisy and Lily's Valley, thinking I had only done like one draft and it was almost perfect and we just needed to tweak it a little bit. That was not the case. I went back and found that I have at least 8 drafts after editing. I remember times where I was like bawling because I just felt like I was such a failure at what I was writing. It's part of the creative process, but my brain doesn't want me to remember that. It wants me to only remember the good times. Once I came back and started writing with my instincts, that stuff, all of the rose-colored glasses kind of came off, and I remembered that this is exactly what I did with my first novel. Things like I wrote what came to me, like I was saying before, I wrote in those paragraphs, and then I connected the dots between the two. I start almost every chapter or end almost every chapter with a list of bullet points on what is going to happen next. I literally have like 5 or 6, sometimes 10 bullet points of everything that I am expecting to happen. And then I go in and I really get granular and I start to fill in the details. I guess this is a way of doing outlining, but it's only chapter by chapter. I can't do the full book. So I do the outline and then I really fill it in. And only once it's filled in can I move on to the next chapter. I cannot leave a chapter unfinished. There can be a few minor details unfinished, but I cannot leave the whole chapter unfinished. Still using my notes app because things come to me when I'm outside. A lot of the times when I'm outside, things come to me. Have a notebook by my bed because, you know, we all get those 3 a.m. thoughts that just won't leave us alone. And if we fall asleep, the thought is gone forever. It will never come back. Your brilliance has disappeared. All right, now that I have gone through a little bit of my writing process and how I get a book started, I'm actually gonna sit down and write. It is 7 o'clock now. It has taken me an hour to record, probably what's gonna wind up being like 5 minutes of YouTube time. I'm going to dive right in. I am currently on chapter 30 of my novel, which I don't know if I mentioned, but I do believe with how big this novel has become, it is looking more and more like it's going to be a duology, which is a little interesting considering I do write women's fiction. I am in the realm of magical realism, so a duology does make sense there, but because I'm primarily a women's fiction writer, I feel like it's interesting, but we're going with it. Everyone around me, including myself, keeps reminding me that I just have to write what wants to be written and then, you know, figure it out later. Anyway, I'm gonna dive in to writing, and then when my husband gets up, we're going to hang out for a little bit, and then I'm gonna pack up and we're going to head off to the coffee shop for a little writing date. Let's see how far it takes us. So I did not wind up getting much writing done at all because I went down the rabbit hole of researching birds, and I spent an entire hour doing that, even though I only really need like one or two bird species for this one scene, just one scene. I learned a lot. I learned a lot about birds, and there's a lot of really cool birds that like live in the southern United States that I've never seen before. But now I am going to, wrap up this and go hang out with Arlen for a little bit and the cats, and then I am going to get ready to go out for my writing date. And I think I'm going to put a pause in the bird research and just put little brackets of like insert bird here and then change the information after I research it a bit more, because I need to move forward with this scene if I'm ever gonna get past it. Oh my gosh, so I am just now leaving the coffee shop. I wound up only writing for about half an hour or so because it was really busy. It took a while to get the coffee, but that was okay because it was just so much fun to kind of be in the space and writing. And what I did write, which I think it was like 500 words, I was really excited about, and I'm super like looking forward to where the scene is going and the new characters that are being introduced. And then afterwards, I had a friend meet up with me at the same coffee shop, and we just talked for a couple of hours, which was so nice because I haven't seen her in a while. And now I'm on my way to another friend's house to pick up some cardboard for our garden because we are in desperate need of it. So desperate. And then after that, I think I might write a little bit more at home depending on how my energy is feeling. But right now I am feeling pretty good. And like I want to dive in for maybe another at least 10 to 15 minutes. Usually this is what I do if I ever feel overwhelmed. I will lower the time of my sprint so that it doesn't feel like such an obstacle, because I can go anywhere from like 5 minutes to 40 minutes. 40 minutes is my max, but like I said, if I'm feeling like a little intimidated, I will lower that down to like between 5 to 15, because who doesn't have 5 or 15 minutes to write a little bit? All right, so I am finally back home after hanging out with two of my friends today, which felt so great and was totally unexpected. So I'm really glad that all came together. I am feeling a little discouraged by how little I have written today. The fact that it's only been about 500 words is, it's not the best, but I am also trying to remind myself, because I get into this whole mindset of you must be productive, you must be outputting, and that's what makes you like worthy of X, Y, and Z. I'm just trying to remember that is a lie. That is just my brain. It's pre-conditioned throughout, my younger years of equating productivity with my self-worth, and that I have the privilege of figuring out and choosing my own timeline each day, which is great. And if I'm not taking advantage of that fact and seeing the people that matter to me most and making that time to be with them, to sit with them, to randomly talk about all of the things that we're interested in, then like, what am I even doing? And if what I am working for this entire time is to be able to have time to spend with the people that matter most to me and to do the things that I love the most, and I'm not doing that, then I'm doing life wrong. I do firmly believe that if, I'm not in a value-centered place, then what am I doing? I'm getting off my personal course. I'm just trying to reframe that for my brain and remind it that, not every day is going to be a 1,500 word writing day. And some days are literally meant to be spent with the people that you love, doing the things that you love. And honestly, I did get a lot done. I got a lot of research done, which is just as important, but it's just not as quantifiable as word count. So my energy is waning a little bit. I don't know that I will actually be writing at all for the rest of today. The heat has really gotten to me. I am not here for this 80-degree weather in the middle of April with zero rain. It is ridiculous. I am not loving this look on Georgia right now. So I think I'm just going to take the rest of the day, rest, and if I feel like getting back to writing later, great. If not, that's also great. Tomorrow is a big old gardening day. I do plan on recording some of that for another garden update vlog later on, and I don't know when it'll be posted, but I'll be recording it. So yeah, I hope that everyone has a really wonderful day. Thank you all for being here. If you want to continue hearing more tips and tricks, and ooh, the sun just came down. Oh, that feels so much better. And I can actually see my eyes now. The reflection isn't so bad. If you are really enjoying the tips and tricks of like my writing practice or just seeing behind the scenes, like feel free to like and subscribe. And also like if you want gardening updates, like I'm going to be doing that. Those are going to be my two like main things, I think, for a little while, because that's what I'm most obsessed with right now. And talking to my friends today, I didn't realize how much knowledge I have like gathered, just like the little squirrel gathering nuts for writing. I have all of this knowledge that I actually want to share, and I hope that it's helpful. I hope that it inspires some of you guys to like get out there and start writing what is in your hearts, what's on your mind, and putting beauty out into the world, making the world filled with a little bit more magic and joy and hope and optimism. And so if that's what my channel does for you, then awesome. I'm doing my job. Until next time, bye.